The pickup came to a halt in the centre of a large city. This was nothing like the charming village where Grandma regularly did her shopping. This was a real metropolis several miles away. Here, the shops displayed their wares to hundreds of curious shoppers. Here, everything seemed prettier, bigger, richer. Grandmother held her head high, determined not to let the big city make her feel small. She stopped in front of a shop and took a business card out of her purse. Verifying that she was at the correct address, she entered the small antique shop. At least, it appeared small from the window, but inside it seemed to go on forever. Hundreds of objects and pieces of furniture of all kinds and from all periods were piled high. Fake Roman gods made of stone stood next to genuine Mexican saints made of wood. Fossils spilled out from porcelain vases, like an invitation to a massacre. Old books bound in leather leaned next to simple paperbacks and seemed to coexist peacefully despite their differences in age and language. Behind the counter, the owner was reading the newspaper. Part antique dealer, part pawnbroker, nothing about the man inspired trust. As Grandma approached, wading through the junk, he did not even bother to look up. "Can I help you?" he said automatically. Grandma jumped at the sound of his voice. "Excuse me," she said, nervously showing him the business card. "You were at our house some time ago, and you mentioned if one day we wanted to sell some of our old furniture or objects." "Yes, that is possible," he replied vaguely. "Well, I have an object that comes from a personal collection," Grandma stammered. "I would like to know if it has any value." The man sighed as he put down his newspaper and slipped off his glasses. He folded the paper and took the mask into his hands. "What is this?" he asked. "A carnival mask?" "No, it is an African mask. This one belonged to the chief of the Bogo tribe. It is unique," said Grandma with pride and respect, hiding her resentment at having to let go of such a beautiful artifact. The antique dealer seemed interested. He studied it for a minute. $1.50, he said with assurance. Grandma gasped. $1.50? That's impossible. This is a unique item of inestimable value, which the antique dealer did not give her time to finish her sentence. "Fine, $1.80, that's the best I can do," he said. "This type of exotic item doesn't sell very well right now. People want practical items, concrete, modern. I'm sorry, do you have anything else?" Grandma was bewildered. Perhaps, I don't know," she stammered. "What is selling well right now?" The antique dealer finally smiled. "Without question, books." Arthur threw aside his shovel, discouraged. Alfred, on the other hand, was perfectly happy with his pile of bones. The garden now resembled a minefield. Arthur filled a large glass of water from the kitchen tap and drank it down in one gulp. Then he went to Grandma's room, took down the key hanging on the bedpost, and headed for his grandfather's study. He entered slowly, lit one of the beautiful Venetian lamps, and sat down at the desk. For a long time he stared at the portrait of his grandfather, who, despite his smile, remained silent. "I can't find it, Grandpa," Arthur said sadly. "I can't believe you hid your treasure in the garden without leaving word anywhere. Any sign or hint, anything that would help us find it. It doesn't seem like you." The painting continued to smile. Archibald was still silent. "Unless maybe I haven't looked for it correctly." Arthur grabbed the first book above the desk and began to leaf through it. Several hours passed. Arthur had gone through almost all the books, piling them high on the desk. Night had finally fallen and he ached all over. He finished with the book that his grandmother had read to him the night before. Once again he saw the drawing of the Bogo, then that of the Minimoys. He skipped a few pages and came across a much more disturbing drawing. It was an evil shadow, like an emaciated body, only vaguely human-looking. The face had no expression, and only 2 red points for eyes. A shiver ran through Arthur from head to foot. It was by far the ugliest thing he had ever seen in his short life. Under the drawing of the shadowy creature was handwritten, Maltazard the Cursed. Outside in the darkness, 2 yellow eyes were trailing their way along the hilltops. It was an ordinary van, piercing the night with its powerful headlights. Guided by the full moon, the vehicle followed the winding road that led to the house. Arthur quickly turned the pages, trying to forget the nightmare vision of Maltazard as quickly as possible. He found the drawing of Selenia, the Minimoy princess. This made him feel much better. He touched the drawing with the tips of his fingers and noticed that it was only loosely glued down. Carefully, he slid a thumbnail underneath and detached it, so that he could contemplate the princess a little closer. "I hope that I will have the honor of meeting you one day, princess," he whispered to it. Alfred sighed pointedly. "Jealous," Arthur said with a grin. The dog did not deign to reply. Just then they heard a vehicle rolling up and parking outside. Arthur thought it was probably Grandma, returning at last. He absent-mindedly turned over the drawing and discovered another one on the back. The boy's face lit up. "I knew he had left a sign," he yelped joyously. The drawing was a map to the land of the Minimoys. It was sketched in pencil, rather poorly drawn or perhaps done very quickly. There was also a sentence that Arthur read out loud. "To find the country of the Minimoys, trust in Shakespeare." Who is that? He asked himself. He stood up and turned the map in all directions. Something about the location seemed oddly familiar. So the entrance to the Minimoys world is here, next to this tree. Wait, I know this tree. And here's the house, and that way's north. He ran over to the window and threw it open. The map corresponded exactly to the view that he had from the study window. The large oak tree, the garden gnome, the moon, everything is there! Exclaimed Arthur. "We found it, Alfred! We found it! The Minimoys are in the garden! I know they'll be able to help us! I bet Grandpa must have told them where the treasure is!" He leaped up and down with joy like a kangaroo that had swallowed a spring. He turned towards the door, eager to share his discovery with his grandmother. But instead, he ran straight into the antique dealer and his 2 movers. "Careful, young man, careful," said the antique dealer, deftly steering him aside. Despite his surprise, Arthur had instinctively hidden the drawing behind his back. The man went out into the corridor again to speak to Grandma. "It is open, ma'am. Open and occupied." Grandma came out of her room and joined them. "Arthur, I have told you that I do not want you playing in this room," she said nervously. She caught Arthur by the arm and pulled him back so the antique dealer could pass. "Please excuse him. Go on in, please," Grandma said politely. The antique dealer glanced around the study like a vulture checking that a corpse is really dead. "There, now this is interesting," he said with a calculating smile. Arthur discreetly tugged his grandmother's sleeve. "Grandma, who are these people?" he whispered in a worried voice. She wrung her hands. The man is here to appraise your grandfather's things. If we have to move, we might as well get rid of all this old stuff," she said, trying to convince herself as much as him. Arthur was dumbfounded. "You're going to sell Grandpa's things?" Grandma paused, a brief hesitation, a moment of remorse, then let out a long sigh. "I'm afraid that we don't have a choice, Arthur." "Of course we do, of course we have a choice," cried the boy, waving his drawing. "Look, this will help us find the treasure. Grandpa left us a message. It's all here on the map." Grandma didn't understand. "Where did you get that?" "It was under our noses all the time, in that book you read me last night," Arthur explained. But Grandma was too tired to listen to fantasies. "Put that back where it belongs immediately," she said severely. "Grandma, you don't understand. It's a map to find the Minimoys. They're out there, somewhere in the garden. Grandpa must have brought them back from Africa with him, and if we can find them, I'm sure that they'll be able to guide us to Grandfather's treasure. We are saved," he declared. Grandma wondered how her grandson could have gone mad in such a short time. "This is no time to play, Arthur. Put that back where it belongs and keep quiet." "You don't believe me?" You think Grandpa was just telling stories? Grandma placed her hand on his shoulder. Arthur, you're a big boy now, aren't you? Do you really believe that the garden is full of tiny elves who are just waiting for you to visit so they can give you a bag of rubies? The antique dealer whipped his head around like a fox catching a scent. Excuse me? He asked politely. No, nothing. I was speaking to my grandson, Grandma answered. The antique dealer continued his inspection as if nothing had happened, but his ears were alert. Of course, if you also have jewellery, we buy that as well, he said, the way you would toss bread out to pigeons. Unfortunately, there are no jewels on the horizon, Grandma answered firmly. Once again, she turned towards Arthur. Now put that drawing back where it belongs, and fast. The boy obeyed reluctantly, while the antique dealer read the banner hanging above the desk like a birthday garland. Words often hide other words. William S. The antique dealer seemed amused by this enigmatic sentence. S for Socrates. Yes. No. S for Shakespeare. William Shakespeare, Grandma said. This rang a bell in Arthur's head, and he slid out the drawing again. He reread the phrase on the back. To find the country of the Minimoys, trust in Shakespeare. Ah, well, that was close, exclaimed the antique dealer. Grandma threw him a sharp look. Yes, only 2,000 years out of the neighbourhood. How quickly time flies, he said, trying to hide his ignorance. You're right, time does fly, so please hurry up and make your selection before I change my mind, Grandma answered. We'll take everything, the antique dealer gestured to his men. Grandma was speechless. Arthur started to slide the drawing into the back pocket of his trousers, but he wasn't quick enough. Tut tut, no cheating, my boy, said the antique dealer with an inquisitive smile. I said we will take everything. Regretfully, Arthur took the paper out of his pocket and handed it to the antique dealer, who quickly placed it into his jacket pocket. That's right, my boy, said the dealer slyly, patting him on the head. The movers began their work. Furniture and objects disappeared with frightening speed under the tearful eyes of the poor woman who was watching years of memory slip away. The scene was as sad as a forest going up in smoke. One of the movers grabbed the portrait of Archibald. Grandma stopped him as he passed, seizing the edge of the frame. No, not that, she said firmly. He said everything, the mover protested. Grandma began to yell. And I say everything except the portrait of my husband. The employee looked at his boss, who decided this might not be worth the trouble. Simon, leave her husband alone. He didn't do anything to you, joked the antique dealer. He took the painting and held it out to the old lady. Here, take it, ma'am. A gift on the house, he had the nerve to add. The back door of the van was opened, and the two movers piled in the last boxes. Arthur lay stretched out on the living room couch, watching his grandmother at the doorway as she finished her negotiations with the antique dealer. The man counted out the bills and put the pile in her hand. There you go, $300 in cash, he announced proudly. That's a small sum of money for 30 years of memories, Grandma murmured. It's an advance, the merchant assured her. If I sell everything, you'll have an additional sum of at least 10% per item. Marvellous, Grandma replied ironically. The antique fair takes place in 10 days. If you change your mind, you can always come and get them before then, advised the antique dealer. That is very kind of you, she replied dryly. She opened the front door to escort the antique dealer out and found herself face to face with a short man in a grey suit, accompanied by two policemen. There was no need for a detective to identify the short man as a sheriff. Mrs. Suchot? The lawman asked politely, although the tone of his voice left no doubt as to the purpose of his visit. Yes, Grandma replied. One of the two police officers tried to reassure her with a small friendly wave, and she realised it was Martin, her friend from outside the supermarket. The man in grey continued. I am Frederick Sinclair, the sheriff. The antique dealer could tell it was time for a quick exit. See you soon, ma'am. It was a pleasure doing business with you, he said, taking off into the night. The pile of bills that Grandma was holding in her hand caught the sheriff's eye. I see I came at just the right time, he said. He pulled out a letter. I have a notice against you demanding payment for work done on your house several years ago by one Ernest Davido. It amounts to a sum of $185, to which has been added a late penalty of 6%, along with the court costs. That comes to a total of $290. Grandma looked at a pile of banknotes and handed them over, dazed. The sheriff grabbed them, somewhat surprised at not having to fight for them. "May I?" he said, counting the bills with lightning speed. Arthur watched the scene from the couch. He was neither disturbed nor astonished, simply disgusted. He understood that his grandmother had been thrust into a downward spiral from which she could not escape. "Unless I am mistaken, $3 are missing," said the sheriff. "I don't understand. That should be exactly $300, Grandma replied with astonishment. "Do you want to count them yourself?" he asked with great politeness and no doubt. There was little chance that he had made a mistake. He was like an undertaker's assistant. If he tells you that his client is dead, you can count on it. Grandma was overwhelmed. She slowly shook her head. "No, you must be right." In his van, travelling through the night, the antique dealer rubbed his hands together with satisfaction. "That was a nice little deal. Well handled," he confided to his assistant, laughing. He dug his hand into his pocket. "Now, let's see what that little monster was trying to hide from us." He took out the paper that Arthur had given him so reluctantly and unfolded it slowly with pleasure. It was a supermarket shopping list.